Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf. It's almost November and that means new books. And as always, for the purposes of this video, the term TBR means to be released. So for those of you who might be new, what I do is at the end of each month, I look at the new releases for the next month, in this case November, and then I pick a couple, 4, 5, 6 books that I find interesting and I share them with you. And as always, we start off with literary fiction, and for November, if you know me at all, you might not be surprised, I picked the new novel by Joyce Carol Oates, Hazards of Time Travel, which will be published at the end of the month. Joyce Carol Oates doesn't need an introduction, I suppose. She's one of the most prolific American writers today, and her new book is a dystopian novel. The book is set partly in 2039 in a dystopian America, United States, where life is controlled, free thinking is forbidden, and the main character, a young woman, a girl, almost 17, 18 years, Adrienne, she gets in conflict with the authority, and as a punishment, she is quote-unquote teleported back to the late 1950s, 1959, to a university town, a fictitious university town, Wayne, Scotia, in Wisconsin. She's exiled from her time and life for 4 years in order to be re-educated. The main part of the book then is set in 1959 in that university, on that university campus. I have a difficult relationship with Joyce Carol Oates in the sense that it's not a pure love from my side. Some books I really love, others just don't do it for me. But this one, especially because it deals with the current political climate and with themes like free will, decisions you can make or not make, I thought it sounded really interesting. So my pick for November is Hazards of Time Travel. The second book is historical fiction, and that is Samantha Harvey's The Western Wind, which will be also published at the end of November on the 23rd. Harvey is an English writer. Her debut novel, which was published in 2009, The Wilderness, was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. The Western Wind is set in a very small, secluded village, Oakham, in Somerset in 1491. Oakham is secluded from the world by a river, and there is no bridge to cross that river, which is already quite a picture and a metaphor, I guess. Anyway, the book opens when a dead body is found of one of the villagers, a very wealthy man, and then the village priest tells us the story of what happened. So there's the first day when the body is found, but then the structure of the book is quite unusual because we go back a day in each chapter. So the story is told backwards. If you know me and my book preferences, you know that I don't read that much historical fiction, I have to admit. But this one sounded really interesting, first of all, because of the time it's set in, the late 15th century, but also this idea of a small, secluded community. I imagine, you know, that there's this claustrophobic atmosphere because the village is cut off from the world, and I thought the idea of the structure to tell the story backwards, that sounded interesting, and that's why The Western Wind made it on my TBR for November. For my third pick, we move on to translated fiction. As you might remember, I said in a previous video that I did not read nearly enough translated fiction this month, so I want to sort of, try the last couple of months to to remedy that. And my pick for November is Love in the New Millennium by San Chu, a Chinese writer translated from the Chinese by Annelies Finnegan Wasmoon, and it will be published end of November on the 20th. Now, San Chu, I hope I don't butcher. I rehearsed the pronunciation of the name, but I'm sure I'm butchering nevertheless. But anyway, I hope you'll forgive me if any Chinese-speaking viewers watch this. But San Chu is one of my favorite modern Chinese writers. She was born in 1953, and she writes mainly short stories, novellas, and short novels. And she has this kind of Kafkaesque feel. Her work has this Kafkaesque feel. Love in the New Millennium is follows a group of women in a dystopian controlled world. There is this TBR is heavily dystopian. I just realized that. And we follow these women in various stories, how they deal with this world, whether they try to escape or whether they try to find love in various disguises. I don't know much more about it. As I understood, it's stories that are interconnected, but it's presented as a novel. The publisher on the blurb said darkly comic novel, which sort of is the style of this writer. And it sounded really interesting. And as I said, because San Chu is such an interesting modern Chinese writer, her new book made the November TBR. And my final two books are both science fiction. I told you already, this TBR is dystopian sci-fi heavy. And the first one is a collection of short stories, N.K. Jemisin, How Long Till Black Future Month, which will be published on the 20th of November. Now, you know that, let me tell you first, N.K. Jemisin is an American writer writing fantasy / science fiction. And you probably remember how much I loved her Broken Earth trilogy. And when I saw that she now publishes a collection of short stories, I'm excited about it. The collection is in her usual style. It deals with current political issues like the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, but also the Black Lives Matter movement. But she gives each story her typical N.K. Jemisin fantasy or science fiction twist. I think that sounds very interesting. I've never read any short stories by her, even though she won prizes with her short story, and one of the prize-winning short stories is included in this collection. But I'm very much looking forward to exploring more of N.K. Jemisin's work after the Broken Earth trilogy, which I loved so much. So this new collection is certainly on my TBR for next month. And then the last book, also sci-fi, as I said already, and that is Nancy Kress, Terran Tomorrow, which will be published on the 13th of November. Now, Nancy Kress is an American sci-fi writer, and this is the third part in a trilogy, the Yesterday's Kin trilogy. The first book, Tomorrow's Kin, I really, really loved. It's this whole series explores a first encounter story. So Earthlings meeting aliens. And the first book, like I said, I really loved. The second book, which I read earlier this year, If Tomorrow Comes, didn't really convince me. I thought it was sort of a rehash of the same themes when the Earthlings then went to this alien planet on a spaceship called Friendship. I thought it was a bit meh, but still I loved, because I loved the first one, I'm interested to see how Nancy Kress concludes the trilogy. So Terran Tomorrow picks up 28 years after the second book. The explorers on the Friendship return to Earth after the disaster that happened in the first two books, and they find an Earth changed almost beyond recognition. There was an epidemic and there's only very few humans left, and then the story takes off from there. I think that you can read the books as standalones, and I would suggest that if you're interested in Nancy Kress's work, the first book in the trilogy is certainly worthwhile to read. I can't, like I said, because I thought it was a meh book, I can't really recommend the second in the trilogy, but you might as well want to start with the third one and then see whether you like it. Because, like I said, the books, although they are a trilogy and one book picks up after the previous book ends, you can read them as standalone. So I'm interested in Terran Tomorrow, and hopefully, fingers crossed, the third one will be as good as the first. So these were my picks, new releases for November. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please talk to me down in the comments. As always, tell me whether you are interested in any of the books that I mentioned, or whether you have new releases in November that you are looking forward to. And I'll see you all soon in my next video. Bye-bye.